All right, so this is the clay magnet demo here. Really great introductory project, kind of getting used to clay, things like that. So the things that you need out, your canvas mat, so you could work on it because you don't want your clay to stick to your table. You want to have your little rolling pin, a couple different clay tools here that were in your bag, a water for your slip, and then a couple different templates or cutouts that are gonna make like the base shape of your magnets. I happen to have like some little cutters here for polymer clay for Sculpture One. So if you have like cookie cutters like that are really basic shapes and stuff like that at home, cool. But if you are like me and don't make sugar cookies ever, you might not have those. So some options would be like the base of a little like cup. This is the cap to a spray paint bottle, or you could just cut your own little template. I just cut a little 2x2 square out of a piece of mat board, but you could cut a piece of cardboard, a piece of like thick paper, whatever you want into whatever shape you want, and then you can just cut it out, lay this on top and trace over it and cut it out that way. So you have a lot of options here. So the first thing you're gonna do is take a small piece of clay out of your bag. It does not need to be a big piece for this. Like these are very tiny little magnets that you're making, so you only wanna remove the clay that you need. I'd say this is more than enough for probably, I don't know, like 3-4 magnets. The other clay, wrap it up in some wet paper towel and put it in your bag. So I picked a particularly crusty piece of clay because I didn't want to take a good piece that you guys would be using. So this is a lot more dry than I would like it to be. This is like on its way to being leather hard. So not super ideal, but we get the point here. So you want your clay to be wedged if it isn't like straight from the block, whatever. If this is kind of like recycled clay from other projects, you're gonna wanna wedge that out. If you need a refresher for that, go back to the basics of clay presentation and you could look at that. So we need to make a flat slab. We need to roll the slab out so that way we can cut or trace pieces out. Right now this is kind of ball shaped. So what I'm gonna do to help it is I'm going to flatten it with my hands to kind of make like a really thick pancake. And you can see how bad this is cracking. Like this is entirely too dry for me to be using, but the reason we want to smush it is because that lets the rolling pin roll over it a lot easier. It's like impossible to roll out something flat from a ball. So help it out a little bit, and then you're gonna take your rolling pin, and I like to keep kind of moving it. This obviously isn't a really enormous rolling pin, so we don't want to create any grooves, and you want to roll it out to the size or the thickness of, I would say, no thicker than your pinky finger, because you're going to add stuff to it, and we don't want the overall thickness to be thicker than your thumb, but we also don't want it to be paper thin, because then it's going to just flop around and not really hold the weight of the stuff that you're adding to it. So if you're finding that rolling is like really awkward and you're just pressing it around the, pushing it around the table, sometimes it's a good idea to stand up so that you're like hitting it at a different angle and you could roll it a lot easier. Okay, so if I'm trying to cut something out that's like, this is obviously pretty self-explanatory, but let's say I'm trying to cut out this little square here. I'm gonna take my needle tool because it's got this nice pointy end on it here, and I'm just going to go around the edges. I'm pressing down and I'm cutting out this square. So I have this one, and normally I would just like to kind of work on one magnet at a time, but I already have this slab rolled out. Like, I'm not gonna waste this nice little slab here. So that's kind of big. So my other side of my cup, while this is here, I'm gonna cut out Should probably go the whole way around, huh? I'm gonna cut out another magnet base. That cup had paint on it. That was a poor choice. Now that's pink. And I could probably even get another one out of here as well. So these scraps I'm gonna set aside because I'm probably gonna use stuff to put on my magnet, so I need a little bit of clay here. So the next step would be attaching. You still want to attach stuff while your clay is nice and wet. You don't want it to get to leather hard because it's not going to bond. So we learned that in your notes. So let's say I pre-made this really awful looking heart here. Let's say I wanted to add this heart to the middle of my magnet. So on the back, I'm going to score. I'm gonna rough it up in the spot where it's gonna go. I'm also going to score that really well with my needle tool, perfect tool for that. And then I'm gonna add just a little bit of water, enough to make it kind of gooey, and I'm gonna stick it down. I kind of like to wiggle it around a little bit to get like a good suction on it. And then to make sure that it is super attached, I'm actually gonna go through with my clay tool here and I'm going to kind of like seal down those edges. You'll see like a little bit of water leaked out. That's fine, that's good. That way I know that this is really, really bonded to that original slab. It's not going anywhere in the drying or firing process here. So this is a really quick example, but I don't love how this is just kind of like stacked on top of the magnet. I would actually personally want to kind of like round this out so it looks like it's like bubbled on top of the magnet. We don't want to have just like slabs on top of slabs on top of slabs. You want to make it look as though it's like in the round. It's a relief on this little base here. All right, so let's pretend that this looks good because it definitely doesn't. And let's say you're done attaching everything to your little magnet. You are going to want to let this magnet probably dry just a little bit. So let's say you're spending a really long time on these in one work day. Maybe you want to just set this aside and it could dry out while you're making your other ones, and then you could come back to it once it's a little bit more leather hard. Or if you need to come back to this another day, you could just stick it in your bag and let it dry a little bit, maybe without a paper towel on it, if it's really, really wet. If it's like kind of dry, like mine's pretty dry, I would wrap this up with a paper towel and get it the next day. So when you are putting this in your bag, at any stage, you want to put it on top of something. This is just a piece of mat board. It could be like a scrap piece of cardboard that you have at home. It could be like a really old like plastic like plate or something that you have. You just want to keep this piece flat. If you just kind of throw it in your bag and then you're picking your bag up, what's going to happen is your piece is going to get like all warped from the bag being curved, and then it's going to dry out like that, and then you won't be able to like flatten it back out. It'll crack. So make sure that you are keeping these nice and flat as they sit in your bag and as they dry. So let's say it's a new day and now your work is leather hard and you are ready for some texture. It's up to you what kind of textures you want to add, what makes sense with your subject matter. So let's say, I don't know, I'm using this clay tool. I'm gonna make some of these marks, texture. If your clay is leather hard, as you're dragging your clay tools through, you shouldn't see a lot of clay boogers happening. If you see like big clay boogers kind of getting stuck to edges of things in your clay tool, it's too wet still. Like let it dry out a little bit more before you go back and add those details. So If it's leather hard, that means you can't attach anything else to it. So this would be a stage where you're no longer adding anything else. You're just carving out little details, using the clay tools, adding textures, things like that. So I do have like a little bit of like clay boogerness kind of going on here. Let me get closer. So you could see like all these little pieces kind of holding on to it. I would want to maybe even wait till this is more dry. So like maybe waiting even another day. And then going back and taking my paintbrush and actually, it's not bad at this stage here. Flicking off all of those little like boogery clay chunks and making sure everything is nice and clean. So remember, the way that it goes in the kiln is the way that it comes out of the kiln. So if it goes in the kiln with like a crack or a mark or a little hunk of something attached, that's how it's going to come out of the kiln. So you want to complete the required number of these and then let them all dry out. Remember, on your flat surface. So you'll have all of these little magnets, and then you can photograph them for me. Photograph them before you transport them here to school. This is probably the easiest project to transport to school because they're flat and they're small. So you could just like put them in a shoebox or, you know, whatever, to bring them in. So photograph them for me when you're done, upload them to your portfolio. I want to grade them before they go in the kiln, as I would do any project, because, you know, if something bad were to happen and it would explode in the kiln, I want to give you the grade before that would occur. But hopefully that would not occur. So that is the clay magnets. Have a good time with them. I think I forgot to say, I would aim to not make anything too much thicker than your thumb. You don't want to add like piece upon piece upon piece, and then it's like this really, really thick magnet. Not only will that explode, but you know, like, how's it going to sit on the fridge? You need like a space to put that magnet on the back. So that's it.